My fiancee is behaving strangely again. By the Cold People. Last month, my fiancee Faye and I went up to her parents' cabin in Pikes Peak, Colorado, and had a set of extremely weird and terrifying experiences. We found an old dream catcher on a tree in the woods out back, and at night, we heard a series of unsettling voices from the forest. At first, we thought it was someone messing with us, but then, the voices, they began to take on recognizable traits. We heard Faye's grandfather calling out for help. He's been dead since 2012. And we heard my mother laughing. She lives over 700 miles away. Faye got sick and began to talk in her sleep. And at one point, the voice of a woman outside began to repeat some of the things that Faye was mumbling, as though they were communicating. I documented the experience here, and I received overwhelming support from fellow Redditors, and thousands of people got involved with helping us out. Everything was going really great. That is, up until a few nights ago. I'm sorry I haven't posted about this matter in a while, but Faye and I have been trying to forget, especially with her weird sleep disorder. The best course of action for us is to just try to bury what happened and move on with our lives. The more upset or stressed out she becomes, the more she sleepwalks and sleep talks. And that's where the scary things happen. For those of you who haven't read my prior stories, my fiancée has suffered from extensive sleep disturbances since she was 5. She has night terrors and she's an accomplished sleepwalker. At the request of several Redditors, I interviewed her, so you can hear all about her weird experiences. Long story short, some sort of entity became fixed on her while we were at the cabin in Colorado, and it made several attempts to coax her out into the woods. When those attempts failed, it came after me next. It followed us to our home in California, and would try to get into our house at night by communicating with Faye, while she sleepwalked. We were both exposed to whatever it was, to the point where it made us physically ill. My friend Nathan essentially forced us to puke our guts out on some spiritual purging process. Although I wished he told me because we wouldn't have destroyed our living room carpet. We thought it was over, and Faye went back to normal and returned to her playful, funny self. She got her strength back, and not just physically, but the strength of her personality returned as well. She had been feisty and won't put up with any of my shit. Which was a great sign that she was feeling better. She's been wearing her engagement ring too. It hasn't left her finger since we got back. But 2 nights ago, weird shit started to happen. I absolutely dread writing this because I know paying attention to it, I risk exacerbating the situation. The part of the carpet where we had lost our lunch is permanently stained, and rather dark. All because I couldn't afford to get a decent carpet cleaner out in time. We were watching, crying through the new Game of Thrones on Sunday. Faye pointed out the stain looked in the shape of a man. It was about 3 feet long, and basically looks like some 2-dimensional troll. We made some Rorschach jokes about it, then went to bed. I rolled over in the middle of the night trying to put my hand on Faye's back, and for a second, I touched that empty space on the bed. 1,000 horrible thoughts rushed through my head. Faye hasn't sleptwalked since things settled down, and I feared that this was an omen that our visitor had returned. I found her downstairs. She was sitting in the dark, spine straight in front of the TV. It was off, her eyes were closed. But she was running her fingers over the stain on the carpet, whispering to it, giggling. I raced over and threw the lights on, foregoing my rule of never waking her up abruptly from a bout of sleepwalking. I just didn't want this to be happening again. I couldn't accept it. I shook her awake and she said, "How could I forget?" When she came to, she had no idea where she was. She seemed unusually upset that I had woken her up, as if she were in the middle of a very good dream. but then appeared to be frightened when I told her what was happening. I asked if she remembered anything, but she said no. I can't tell if she lied to me or not. On her way upstairs, she inexplicably vomited all over the wall. It was the same dark brown, black color as when Nathan poisoned us. At this point, I was completely freaking out. I tried to keep my cool and help Faye get into bed, and I got her some water. I made sure she was alright. She was absolutely fine and couldn't explain why she had vomited. Then, I shut the light off, closed the bedroom door, and spent a half an hour trying to clean that goddamn wall off. I've mentioned in my previous post that I'm an emetophobe, so cleaning vomit is basically the worst form of punishment I can imagine. But something distracted me from the horrid stench. No matter how hard I scrubbed, the stain would not come out. And it too had splattered in the rough shape of a man. Because of the fact that Faye was standing halfway up the stairs and barfed down the wall, this stain was much, much larger than the one on the carpet, almost 5 feet tall. When I finally got in bed, Faye was still awake. She was kind enough to give me a really nice shoulder rub as I laid there in a heap. I was nauseated and tired. She tried to reassure me, but we both knew what was happening. Whatever it is, it's fascinated with her. It's back, or it never left. I don't know how long we sat there talking, but eventually I just passed out, Faye laying in my arms. She said a few more things in her sleep, but I could never quite catch him. I was just too tired. The next day, I tried to reach out to Nathan, but he wasn't answering his phone. I had to work, so I didn't see Faye all day, and I got home before she did. So I spent several hours jumping at every sound outside while I was grading my students' final papers. When she did get home, she said that she had felt sick all day and just wanted to go to sleep. So she went upstairs, showered, and then got into bed. Around 10:30 p.m., I shut off my laptop and headed upstairs. Faye was sitting on the bed, feet on the ground, staring out the open window into the woods across the street. I gently laid her down and rubbed her back until she snored. That's the only way to guarantee that she won't get up for a long time. And then I inspected the entire house. I don't know if I'm just freaking out, I'm tired or what, but the vomit stains, they seem bigger now than they were before. I'm calling a guy tomorrow to come do a professional cleaning, and I'm pissed because I know I'm going to get stuck with a $200 bill for the job. I checked the backyard and didn't see anything. Then I made sure the front door was locked and all the windows were sealed tight. The last window I checked was the one in the guest room. The one on which Faye had drawn the number 5 backwards while sleepwalking. I stood there for a long time. It was late and dark, and all these memories of the last month kept cycling through my mind over and over. I felt dizzy and sleepy, almost hypnotized. It was a strange feeling, that a mixture of relaxation and terror. Now, I can't explain to you why I did this, but without even thinking about it, I reached out my hand and lazily drew a backwards 5 on the window. And in that tiny little moment, I saw something move behind the trees across the street. Faye abruptly burst into sleep laughter from down the hall. As I walked back to the bedroom in the dark, I could hear her giggling the entire way. Nothing else to report for now. It's 10:31 p.m. on a Tuesday as I write this, and I'm going to sleep. I'll update if there are any new developments. I really and truly pray there aren't any. A lot of Redditors have mentioned that since I retrieved Faye's ring from that creepy dream catcher, it's possible that it's been cursed. After all, the ring was given back to me. It could be what's causing all these new disturbances around the house. So, Faye and I decided to make the long trek back to Pikes Peak, from whence the evil ring came, and destroy it by throwing it into the mine at the top of the mountain. We gathered a fellowship of 7 people to help us on this journey. Just kidding. But seriously, there's a lot of people speculating that the ring is now the problem. I am taking this into consideration, but Faye, she's not willing to part with it right now. And seeing as how she just got it back, yeah. But if the entity seeking Faye did curse the ring and did get me to break the dream catcher to retrieve it, it's even more clever than I could have anticipated. More on this if I decide to make a move. We had a professional carpet cleaning service come out yesterday and try to tackle the puke stain situation. The guy told me over and over, that's not vomit. I can get vomit out. It took him a long time, and he managed to get most of the stain out of the carpet in the living room, and he recommended we get checked out at a hospital. I told him that we already had. Some parts of the carpet are still spotted and ruined. He gave me a discount. The drywall in the stairwell is another story. The guy took one look at it and said we needed to paint it, but I insisted the stain had to be removed before doing so. He told me to strip and sand the drywall, or he would come back and do it on his day off for a small fee. I told him I'd take care of it. He made some exorcism joke and left. I was not amused. Faye came home very excited yesterday. She'd gotten a promotion at her job. We celebrated by going out to dinner at our favorite steakhouse. She ordered her normal meal, thank God, and had a few drinks. I didn't drink at all, so I was the DD for the evening. When we got home, she pretty much went right to bed. And on the way up the stairs, she drunkenly said, "Fuck that guy," and pointed at the stain at the wall. That night, I had a very strange dream. I dreamed that I was trying to scrub the stain off the wall, like I had a few nights ago. But this time, I was scrubbing in the dark. The moonlight was barely seeping through the window and illuminating the outline of the stain, which looked more like a man than it did before. I loomed over it as I crouched down the stairs. But then, something weird happened. The wall underneath the stain turned mushy, like oatmeal, and gave way to my hand. My arm went right through the drywall. I pulled it out and there was a faint light coming through the hole. I pushed more and more of the squishy wall out of the way. It crumbled and flopped to the floor on the other side. At last, I cleared a hole big enough to squeeze through. It led to a familiar place. I realized where I was the second I stepped in. It was freezing cold, even in the dream. I was in the cellar of the cabin, where I had found all those jars and that hair, where I had found the pieces to make more dream catchers. I felt instantly afraid, and turned around to go back into my house, but the wall was just sealed shut. The only way out of the cellar was through the open panels at the top of the wooden staircase, leading to the outside. The snow was falling down onto the stairs. I remember seeing something on the ground behind one of the shelves. I picked it up and instantly recognized it as its importance. It made me feel like I understood everything better. But before I could see what it was, I was woken up by Faye. We were still in bed. She was sitting up against the pillows, running her fingers across my neck and back. She was looking down at me, smiling. But her hair was dangling in such a way that it obscured her face a little, and the moon lit her up from the window behind her. So she looked kinda different. I recognized my fiance's hair and body, but her face looked old and withered, like an old man's. At that point, I noticed that her hand felt different too. It was rough and heavy like a guy's. It took me a second to realize that she was probably asleep, so I sat still and just watched her. A few moments of this and she abruptly got out of bed and walked towards the door, mumbling to herself about that sound again. I followed her quietly, wondering what she was going to do. She walked through the hall, never searching for the light switch, and stood at the top of the stairs. She started whisper arguing with something down there in the dark. Like when a couple bickers in public and they're trying to hide it. She said, "You need to leave. You need to get the fuck out of here and never come back." "I don't know any of them. I don't know anybody." "Is that you? Who's with you? Who's making all that noise? Are you just going to stand down there and call my name all night? Well, why don't you come up here then? You think I don't know what you're doing? And then the last thing she said was, We don't know! Leave us alone! She shouted it so loud it took me off guard and momentarily paralyzed me with fear. I rushed over and grabbed her before she could fall down the stairs. She told me to get off of her and that she didn't need any help, then brushed past me towards the bedroom. Along the way, she vomited. And I got to spend another hour to clean it up while she slept soundly. And guess what? New stain. It wasn't until writing this that I realized that the stain had been making its way closer and closer to the bedroom. This morning before work, I talked to Faye about what happened. She had no recollection of any of it, including barfing up our expensive dinner. But she did say that she heard several voices outside the house early this morning. She said there was a child calling out, Where is she? Where is she? And a man grumbling angrily. She couldn't make out his words. She also said that I kept talking in my sleep this morning, which is something that I almost never do. Faye agreed to seeing a doctor again because of the vomiting, and also mentioned to me that after reading the Reddit comments, that hypnotism might be worth a good try, so we're looking for one in our town. More on that if anything develops. Also, her sister Becca is coming to visit in a few days and to see how things are. Becca lives in Arizona with her husband and her infant son. I've only actually met her a handful of times. It'll be nice having some extra people in the house for once. In other news, Nathan is still not returning my calls, so I might try the ranger station later tonight. I also want to let you all know that it's finals week, both for me as a graduate student and for the undergrad students I teach. I might not be able to update every day like I usually do, so if I go missing for a day or two extra, don't be alarmed. I am keeping a close watch on Faye. And I do have one last thing to report. Today at lunch, I put my head down in my office and I drifted off for a few minutes, which is unusual for me because I'm a chronic insomniac and I don't take naps. Ever. I had another dream. T-Way came to me. For those of you who don't know who T-Way is, he was a Native American who lived near Pikes Peak. He and his son, Nathan, blessed our cabin and helped me and Faye in our struggle last time. He died in the woods under mysterious circumstances during my last night in the cabin. In the dream, I was looking out of our bedroom window, and T-Way was standing at the tree line across the street. It was really him, not the creature that did the horrifying impersonation of him. He was pointing into the forest. I think I'm supposed to go in there, I guess. I don't know whether I can trust my own dreams or not anymore. That's where the imposter hides. Edit. I just got out of work literally 30 minutes ago, and I got a call from Faye's boss. I'm on their emergency contact list. They sent her home for behaving erratically. I'm on my way home now. Sorry for the wait, no sleep. I really do appreciate your concern. I can't even begin to describe how busy I am right now. Faye's older sister Becca and her son Caleb are here, staying in the guest room. It's finals week for my students, so I'm hosting tons of meetings with them. And I've only gotten one of 3 major projects done for my doctoral advisor. And I'm grading a huge stack of essays. Oh, and something is trying to steal my fiance's skin or mind control her into killing me or something. So, yeah, it's pretty busy around here. How are you? Where did we leave off? Oh, yeah. Friday morning. My ass hadn't even warmed the seat in my office before I got the call from Faye's boss, notifying me that Faye had been acting erratic. Erratic, in fact, to the point that they sent her home from work. Apparently, she stood in an open doorway of one of the storehouses, just staring into the darkness within, not moving for several minutes. A coworker tried twice to get her to snap out of it, but she didn't. A few minutes later, the boss came over and found Faye inside, standing in the shadows, looking out. It was pitch black inside the storehouse, so when the boss flipped on the lights, she found Faye standing in the corner, just smiling up at her, eyes unfocused. A few seconds later, she came right out of it and went back to work. An hour later, my fiancé allegedly claimed that she could feel eyes on her while she was working and had to go inside the break room and sit down. Her coworkers found her fast asleep and just left her there, thinking she was hungover or sick, and then they went to lunch. When they came back, Faye was sleepwalking in large circles around the perimeter of the room, singing a lullaby. This scared the other employees so much that they got the park manager to actually drive her home. They didn't trust her to drive. Now Faye has to take a drug test because they think she's on drugs. Hopefully, she's completely clean. When I got home, I immediately took Faye up to urgent care, who miraculously got us in a reasonable amount of time. We explained everything. Everything. I thought the doctors were going to think we were completely insane, but both of them actually just looked scared shitless. After a CAT scan, a blood panel, and several other tests, they concluded that Faye was healthy, but she needs a full psychiatric evaluation. They gave us a referral and we made an appointment, but it's 2 weeks out. We'll have the blood panel back sooner. When we got home, Faye took a nap, and I went into the woods across the street from our neighborhood, where I saw T-Way in the dream. For those of you who aren't caught up, it's pronounced T-Way, and we still don't know how he died. I wandered around between the trees trying to figure out if there was something I needed to find. For about 10 minutes, I searched around and found nothing. But then I remember the phrase that many of the voices at the cabin kept repeating. Up in the trees, down in the hole. You go up in the trees, or all the way down, down, down. So deep, you never see the light again. There were so many variants of that phrase, I can't remember them all. But I looked up in the tree and voila. There was a crudely constructed object made of twigs and twine, dangling from a branch about 30 feet off the ground. It kind of looked like the dream catcher that we found at the cabin, but it was obviously made of twigs and out of the tree from which it dangled, so it was a different color and shape. I climbed the tree and tried to retrieve it, but it was so frail that it fell apart the second I pulled it towards me. One thing stood out about it in particular. It had strands of fiery strawberry blonde hair dangling off of it. Just like Faye's. I need your opinions on this. As far as I know, Faye cannot climb trees. But then again, apparently there's a lot I don't know about Faye. My fiancé went out around 7 p.m. to go pick her sister Becca up from the airport. She insisted that I stay home and rest. I think she feels bad about how often she sleep deprives me. I reluctantly obligated. They came home around 9 o'clock, and with them was Becca's son, Caleb. I know nothing about babies, but Caleb is pretty cool. He cries less than my students do, and he's smarter than half of them. And Faye absolutely adores him. Becca and I caught up over hot chocolate in the living room, while Faye unleashed the full scope of her maternal instincts upon Caleb upstairs. She sang lullabies, laughed, cooed, basically went full mommy crazy. I know that when Becca leaves, I'm gonna have to deal with Faye crying and wishing we had kids already. Becca is tough as nails, just like her sister. And it comes from being raised in a strict military family. But having a strict dad also teaches girls how to be expert liars. And I got the sense that Becca was selling me all sorts of bullshit when I told her about what we went through at the cabin. Becca was about 5 years older than Faye, and has already been married twice. She has a 10-year-old daughter with her first husband. She claims that she only went to Pikes Peak once. She said that the drive made her carsick, so whenever her parents went up there with Faye as a little girl, she'd stay over at a friend's house instead. She told me that she had no idea what the number 5 meant to Faye, and dodged me like a minnow when I pressed it. I get the overwhelming sense that she is deeply troubled by Faye's behavior, and not just because it's creepy. She knows something she's not telling me. Faye's entire family seems to be keeping me out of the loop on something big. A very tech-savvy Redditor offered to help me track down Jennifer, and he delivered. When I checked my email that night before bed, he had provided me with an email address and a phone number for Jennifer's husband. She remarried after Tom hung himself. Tom was so deeply disturbed by his experiences at the cabin that he just couldn't take it, even after moving to Nevada. Or maybe he just couldn't take Jennifer. I emailed the guy, his name was William, and he got back to me the next day and asked me to call him. I explained the entire situation to him. He informed me that he and Jennifer had moved to Washington State years ago, but she had started abusing prescription medication a year into their marriage. And over the course of a few weeks, she repeatedly told William that she had heard her daughter, who died in childhood, calling to her from the forest outside their home. One night, when William got home from work, the back door was open and Jennifer was just gone. She left with her shoes and jacket. Jennifer went missing for almost 6 months. A group of campers found her remains over 40 miles away, said she had been buried in the ground, with her legs sticking out, and they had been gnawed clean by wolves. That night, I woke up to the sound of a baby crying. Faye was gone. My first thought was that it was coming for her, because a few weeks ago, she had accurately mimicked the sound of a child crying while walking around the house at night. But this time, it was Caleb. I walked down the hall that led to the guest room and found the door open. Becca wasn't in there and the crib was empty. I followed the sounds down the stairs, walking past the barf stain on the wall. I'm gonna strip it today. And saw Faye and Becca sitting on the couch. Faye was cradling Caleb in her arms, staring at him, while Becca was babbling on and on about her husband. She didn't notice that Faye was actually asleep. And when Faye looked up at me, only the whites of her eyes showed. They were rolled back in her head. She was completely out of it. And then she smiled. I stood there for a second, just really disturbed at the scene, and didn't say anything. Suddenly, something moved outside of the sliding glass doors behind them. The door that leads to our tiny little garden. It was almost pitch black out there. But the black shape of a man, a huge man, moved away from the glass and vanished into the darkness. Someone had been standing there behind Faye and Becca, watching them play with Caleb. I took off out the front door, hoping to circle around and intercept the man. We lived in a housing complex, so the walkway goes behind all of the houses. The only thing separating it from the backyard is a tiny little wooden gate that you can literally step over. It's mostly to keep dogs and rodents out. But I ran up and down the path and found nothing. Nothing at all. There was, however, an oily black substance on the ground about 10 yards away from our back patio. Last night, Faye started mumbling more lullabies in her sleep. I'm guessing it's probably because she's been thinking about Becca and Caleb's visit, and she loves kids just so much. She also said, "He's in the stains. He gets up and walks around in the dark." I took the advice of a few Redditors and asked, "Faye, what did you forget?" She paused for a long time and then replied, "He needs me." Right when she said it, a child laughed somewhere outside. Tomorrow, the Shoshone woman who visited us last month is going to come back with her friend who specializes in hypnosis. I will report the results when I can. Again, please forgive me if this takes a bit longer. This week is a nightmare. Update. Finally got a call from Nathan. More to come soon. Guys, I hope you enjoy this story. Obviously, this is a little bit of an update from the My Cabin Getaway. This is going to be another two-ish hour long thing, so sit back and enjoy it. This is part 1, 2, and 3 from the original Reddit post from the Cold People. I'll link that in the description so you can go check it out. I would like to thank my $10 and above patrons, Dan R., Paul Z., Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, Chaos X, JY, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, and Ethan A. And of course, all the $5 patrons listed in the description. If you want some access to Patreon-only content, please consider becoming a patron. As you know, YouTube doesn't pay anything. I get I think it's $2 per 1,000 views. So if you want to help the channel, this one survive and grow, please hit that Patreon up. I'd really appreciate it. Oh, and you get some Patreon-only content. What's not to love about that? Duh.